So welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast. This is where we explore the new game-changing understanding that can unlock new levels of performance, resourcefulness, and well-being in the workplace. Join us if you want to be part of the new breed of leaders in business. Join us if you're fed up with the conventional echo chamber. And join us if you want to be part of the new revolution in understanding how the mind works and recognize that we are more than just our psychology and that can lead to better results.
Hello and welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast series. And today we've got another lovely conversation lined up with a guest who's been on the show before and so enjoyed our conversation. We're doing it again. So Clare Dimond, who did an episode a few months ago where we were talking about the workplace business relationships and communication. And it was a really great conversation. So we're going to have another one. And today it's going to be all about wants, desires, things that we want to achieve. And that will cover the workplace and wider. So really looking forward to this very, I think, relevant and valuable topic, Clare. So welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Piers. So great to be here. And it's a super topic, isn't it? It's at the heart of everything. What do we want? What do we need? What's going to make us happy? Where are we going? And I think it's an area where there's quite a lot of confusion that sends us into a bit of a spiral. Our mind gets a bit lost in. Well, actually, I think the things that we think we most want are the things that get pushed away, and the things that we are most dreading are the things that are constantly in our lives. And so I think it's really an interesting area.
Yeah. And already just that 1 minute or 30 seconds, what you said, there's so much to unpack even in all of that, because there's so many elements to this. And actually it often, I find with clients, becomes a really good way of, if I can call it this, seeing where they're at with their understanding of the self and the mind and the universe, because it gets to the sharp end of, so what's my life about? What am I here to do? Or how do I go and get that? Or how does that manifest? How does that create? And I imagine for listeners who will be listening to our podcast, probably from different levels of understanding, there might be some people who are quite into the work we do and they're looking for the finer nuances of this. And there might be people just coming along to have a listen to start with. So we'll do our best to try and track all of that as we go through, because I think for me, whenever I have a client talking about what they want, the first place I point to, be interested to see where you go, is to say, well, what are you attaching to that want? Because generally, if you think about it in life, we're looking for more feelings of peace, fulfillment, oneness, connection. And then they're just words, but that's what we're aiming to do. And we're thinking that if I get something, a relationship, a goal, a business promotion, an object, a state of mind, then I'll have more of that. So we're tethering our very being to a want or a desire. So I tend to go there to start with and go, regardless of what the want is, what do you think is sourcing all that? What's the essence of you wanting that? Where would you go to start with, just on with someone on that?
I would say that sort of primeval want for peace, for happiness, freedom, presence is like wanting and seeking gets a bad name, doesn't it? I think in this conversation, like we're sort of meant to be accepting and happy as we are, but actually, I think that fundamental drive for absolute peace, absolute bliss, absolute bliss is correct. Like that's makes sense, because that is what we are, and And that's what we were born as. You know, we're born as intelligence of life in a perception created form, in a sort of transient form. But the truth of us is peace. And it you know, as a baby, you know, even though there's crying because there's needs, you know, being sort of voiced, the truth of that baby is uncluttered, unobstructed, unconfused presence. And that's our natural state, I would say. That's the core of what we are. And so the desire, when we're sitting in confusion and the mind is so identified, and we're lost in our own projected wounds, really, in our projected traumas, and we're desperate to get back to the peace and the vitality, the intelligence that we know deep in our subconscious mind that we are. It looks like the only way we can, like you're saying, it looks like the only way we can get there is through the right job or the right bonus check or the right relationship or the right house, right car, the right state of mind, the right emotions, all of it. I would say the want at the heart of it is spot on. The means for trying to get there is a recipe for more and more and more confusion and heartbreak and exhaustion and burnout and depression, because the harder we try, the further away the thing that we're looking for gets.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's the innocent and usually invisible mistake that we're misunderstanding that draw towards going back to what we are, which is our essence of just openness and peace and aliveness. And the way we think we get back there is through this path of acquisition or doing or even being, you know, depending on how evolved we are. And that's the biggest innocent hoodwink, isn't it?
Yeah.
And where we tie ourselves up in knots. And the paradox and the irony of the seeking of that, I think it's amazing how well that hides itself.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've, you know, it feels like an onion layers of things you have to pull back on that for me in the last 20 years, where I think, oh no, I think I've seen, oh no, I haven't. The guise of that, of how it comes about in different forms, is absolutely amazing. But I think, you know, what we're saying, listeners, that one of the first things we're saying is that there is this very natural, innate urge to go back to what we are.
Yeah.
And then when you see that, you can trace that through, and so many of our activities, however misguided they then become noised up, but you can see that in why do we like to go for a walk in nature? Why do we like just having a cup of tea on our own? Why do we try and numb our minds with our Netflix and our phones? Why do we try and escape our thinking? And I remember my son, when he was younger, he went for this phase of when he didn't like what he was thinking, he would literally move. He would run away. So you were going somewhere, and he would then, and then he'd walk the other way, just try to get away from his thinking. And that's what it felt like. He's trying to go, I don't want to be in this thinking I've got, you know, and he physically would move, which is often annoying when you're trying to go the other way to school, right? But so we are trying to escape that conceptualized mind.
Yeah.
But we've accidentally got ourselves completely in a twist on how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that maintains that twist, maintains that confusion, is, I call them mini rewards, but these like little moments of having the thing that we think is it. And like momentarily everything quiets down, the noise in the head quiets down, and, you know, like it might be having attention or recognition or feeling loved, or, you know, something has happened that we finally feel like we're someone, really. I think that's what it is. And then it's gone. And so, but now it looks like, oh, okay, this, if only I can get enough of that,
Yeah.
or if only I can have that permanently in my life, then I'll be okay. So it's sort of these little momentary rewards of fueling the chase, fueling the confusion.
It's such a good point, that, and they come in very different forms, from the ones that society would deem as good, right? Like a functioning relationship, or a promotion, or child doing well at school, or winning a marathon, or whatever it is, or in less good ones, where we try and escape. But in a way, you're right. They're not the point, because they're accidentally reinforcing that we're tethering our okayness to the wrong thing, but they look like they're heading us in the right direction. That's sort of what you're pointing to, I think.
Totally.
But then it feels mean to walk around going, well, it's not really that,
I was just literally just thinking that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, what? So I can't. But I think so. Listeners, as you're listening to this, going, well, what do we do then? Here's something to spot differently about those momentary rewards, those little moments of rewards. Try to pull apart the event or activity that would look like cause that feeling of oneness, and the sensation and the space itself. Because then what I think you can start to see is that okayness or spaciousness or feeling at home is available even when you haven't got the activity of that momentary reward.
Nice, Piers. Yeah.
Right. And if you can start to, it's there anyway. It's hiding in plain sight during my most normal, boring day. There it is. I don't need to go and run up a mountain to get it, or get a promotion, or I don't even need to have a cup of tea to get it.
Yeah.
It's there anyway.
Agree on that last point about tea.
Well, tea's special, right?
Tea's not included in any of this.
Tea's the universal exception to the cosmic rule. Yeah.
But I love that.
Yeah.
And also, and we could take it further, that not only is it always there just in the sort of everyday moments, it's there when the opposite of the thing is happening. So if we think we can find our stability in a client signing up, say, or in being given the job that we've applied for, or someone saying I love you, it's there in the normal day-to-day washing up, blah blah blah, but it's also in the client leaving us, and it's there in the person saying I don't want to go out with you anymore, and it's there in all the rejections, all the indifferences, all the conflicts. And I've just done a podcast look at someone said, but why would we turn towards the suffering? And I was looking at, we turn towards the suffering because, for exactly what you're saying, we in those moments, because we're there and present and curious, it gives the whole system a chance to actually come into reality for the first time, maybe, and to experience the things that we've been trying to get rid of, experience the emotions or the mental state that we're desperately avoiding, and see the reality that it's never the projected idea, ever. It's never what the mind is believing something is going to be. It's just the whole system now curious and open and attentive, which is what we're looking for. That's what we're looking for, that spacious, empty, full presence. And going through moments in which, moments in which what's happening is really the last thing in the world we would want to have happen. Staying there, going through them into reality I think is the biggest gift of transformation that is available.
There's a lot in what you're saying there. So let me just unpick that a bit, because I think well, there's a few elements to that, but one is that what we see in the world, what renders in thought, perception, sensation, is at one level a reflection of us.
Yeah.
So that's what it is, and the resistance to the what is what causes suffering.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the turning away from that then causes disconnect to that moment. So what you're saying and pointing to elegantly is leaning in or turning towards those sensations or feelings that we've been conditioned to think are uncomfortable, or even life events that are like, oh no, I wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
Is where the richness is.
Yeah.
When we can see that what we were saying earlier about that sense of okayness and peace and oneness is in there too.
Yeah.
And actually often in a more powerfully rich way than we'd ever realized, but we shied away from it, and the resistance is what we're feeling, not the thing. And I think that's so fascinating to me, that what we feel is our resistance, not the thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Does that make sense of what you're saying?
Yeah. I love it. I love that, because it's really like, it's mind blowing when we consider that this entire reality of believed me and believed external is an ongoing creation. It's a product of everything that's been learned. And I think above all, really, and particularly when there's great resistance in something, it's because how everything is appearing is really, in those moments, an activation of our greatest fears and our greatest shames and insecurities. Because the things that look worst and the things that are most confronting are really essentially the inner conditioning made external. And so, just like you're saying, there's this sort of manifestation of the inside out, really, that creates an idea of me, creates an idea of the world. And then there's resistance to it, because it's when the mind is unconscious, really, it doesn't realize that all of this is an outcome of our inner hurt. It just looks real, and it looks like our worst nightmare. And so there's intense resistance to it. And the resistance is just keeping in place this whole film, really. And so exactly what you're saying, to go, to be in that reality, with not to try and get rid of resistance, not to try and get rid of suffering, but to just explore what's actually true, and to have whatever feelings are there to be had, and to integrate whatever elements of our past are there to be integrated. That's transformational.
Yes. And yes, absolutely. And just to track the listener here. So what we're not saying is when you feel crap, suck it up, right? We're not saying school of hard knocks and nothing's bad, just when the tough gets tough, the tough get going kind of thing. We're not saying that at all. It may sound like we're just going, it's, I think there's a couple of bits to this, but one thing I find fascinating, and this is a relatively new thing for me to see, I think, in the way that I see it now, is how when we have resistance, how we are, one of the things that creates the resistance and maintains it is the concept of the thing that we tend to think about rather than feel or sense. Mm-hmm. So what we're quite good at doing is, in different types of emotion and feeling, is we're quite good at thinking about it rather than sensing and leaning and feeling into it. Mm-hmm. So That thing, that workplace scenario, that idea of not having my job makes me feel anxious or angry or afraid or whatever. Yes, I know that. I'm very aware of my feelings, someone might say. Yes, I know that. I'm aware, right? But what they've done is they've taken that idea, that they've taken that thing and thought about it and nicely conceptualized it, but they haven't really ever felt it. They haven't ever lent into it, knowing that they aren't it, knowing that they are the consciousness, they are the appearance. Because when you do that, all it becomes is vibration and sensation at the rawest level. And then you can shine a different light on it, which is what you're really saying. You can sort of shine a different light on it, going, well, what is that that I was resisting? So just like a 2-year-old has no ability to conceptualize any sense and feeling, they just are it. Yeah. That's why it's so transient for them. That's why they go in and out. Whereas what we'll do is we'll have this thing that we set up a resistance to conceptually. And we're either indulge the feeling, but never actually feel it. Like, oh, it feels like this. And whenever it comes, we actually lean away from it. Or we'll just conceptualize it. Oh, well, that makes me angry, but again, never really feel it. And at one level, all we have to do is actually just lean into it at a sensational level. And then it quite quickly, after just noticing it, it becomes just being alive. You know, it boils down to this feeling of I'm alive in the rawest sense. And the way I sometimes get clients to have a little practice with this is in the shower, right? So you're in the shower in your normal warm shower, unless they're all wimmed off already, but you're in your warm shower, you turn it to full cold as you can, and just lean into the sensation, whatever it is. Forget all the dialogue that's going, oh my God, it's cold. I can't stay here for more than a minute, right? Forget all that. That just flashes through the mind. And very quickly, it just becomes sensation.
Yeah. Very
quickly, it's just like, oh, it's just sensation.
So cool, Piers.
And that, is like a starter guide for how to do it with bigger, I'm doing air quotes, podcast listeners, a bit bigger things like anxiety and fear and want and need. It's the same thing. So I think there's a lot in what you said. I'm just picking on one bit of it, but one bit of it is I don't think we truly lean in and sense and feel.
Yes.
Which creates resistance.
Yeah.
Which keeps us caught in the bind, in the twist.
I love that. Yes, that's really great. Anything that is, it seems to me, anything that is moving. Well, anything that allows, I would say, the conscious mind identified in, like the believing mind, as Byron Katie would say, the sort of mind that is fixed on separation, I'm like this and they're like that and that's like that. Anything that allows that to shift out of identification and the resistance that inevitably comes in identification to curiosity or witnessing or openness. That for me is that's the point at which the system comes into reality. And so things like feel the fear and do it anyway. If we're going like what you're saying there is, if we're going into, so for example, with my, I had this total phobia of public speaking, and there were many times I was, working in a public relations agency of all places, of course, and but forcing myself to do these talks, but so identified in, like the mind was totally engaged with, what are they going to be thinking of me? I'm messing this up. My career's a disaster. Why am I here? It's just so shameful and embarrassing. And like you're saying, pushing away any feelings that would go with that. So it's like a double thing of push away the feelings, fixate on what the mind is saying. still doing the talk, but nothing changes
Mm.
because the system is maintained within its bubble of projected reality and stuff that cannot be felt. And that bubble just sort of shifts from one meeting to the next, but nothing has changed. But it's as I see it, it's only in the and I think it must come from a sort of readiness, like something shifts enough that, okay, whatever is there to be felt is going to be felt. And
Yes.
the mind is just open now, just curious about what's true. And then everything changes.
It's interesting the way you describe that, because what we would do in the scenario you're talking about with like public speaking anxiety is we would really pay attention to the thoughts and believe them and try and get rid of the feeling. Now, what we're saying is the total opposite.
Yeah.
Is lean into the feeling as much as you can, welcome it, surrender, accept that sensation, that sensing being alive, lean into that and kind of ignore the mind's chatter in that moment, right? So what we were doing is the opposite. We spun that round.
All our lives,
Yeah. And then there's a very interesting thing that you said a couple of times I just wanted to pick up on is bringing the mind into reality, into alignment with reality. Now, that's an interesting phrase, isn't it? Because if we interrogate that with our learned conceptual mind, it will try and work out, well, which reality? The reality as I see it, the reality, that the objective reality that sits, So say a little bit more about what you mean when you, because it's such a lot. I think I know what you're pointing, but just say a little bit more about what you mean by that sentence.
Yeah. So I would say resistance is the sign. Like on our online courses, we look at this sort of crossroads where there's a moment, like the sort of fork is where there's a moment of intense suffering, intense resistance to something. And that's a sign. Normally in our lives before this conversation, we would take suffering as evidence that what is being experienced right now is objectively true. So it might be in a conversation with someone and they're saying something that is offending me or it's sort of, I'm feeling out of sorts with what they're saying, and that resistance is saying, yes, that they're out of order, they're putting you down, you're being excluded or insulted here. And what we look at on our courses is actually that moment of suffering is saying, in this moment right now, it looks like your survival's at stake. It looks like life and death. And that's because the sort of foundation of what you believe yourself to be and of what you believe you need in order to be okay is being challenged. And that's because our idea of what we are has developed to become a series of identifications, really. I'm a mother, I'm a coach, I'm a writer, I live in Marlborough. Those identities look like us, and when they seem to be challenged, it really feels like we're dying. It's like we're so rocked by this challenge, but actually that's a great thing. That's really a gift when that happens. It's not the terror that it looks to be. It's not something to run away from or fight against. It's something to really lean into, to see how our existence seems to depend on having things in the way that we think they should be. And that so suffering is the opportunity to see all the inner workings of the identity, which is always fundamentally insecure. It can't ever be secure because it depends on things that are made of perception. And so all those moments of suffering are the gift that bring everything back into reality, that really shows actually there is nothing at stake here. There is nothing under threat. There is no survival issue going on. It's just a believed idea of me being challenged. And actually, it's being challenged because of the projection from within. It's only because of that insecurity that these things look like an issue in the first place. So it's just in its own cycle of fear and shame, insecurity. And the suffering is saying, oh, okay, cool. None of that is actually true.
Yeah.
It's not even really happening.
Yeah. And it's what we said at the beginning, isn't it? Because it comes back to what we think we are, because the suffering is happening on behalf of our self-identification.
Yeah.
It can't happen at a more fundamental level. So the sensation of resistance and suffering is a little aid, a guide in a way to say, hey, you've tethered yourself to the wrong thing. And it's helping. And I suppose also the other way people could hear this, if again we're trying to track the listener, is, oh, so therefore my objective is to have no suffering or resistance about anything. And we're not saying that either. Well, I'm not saying that, because the whole point of this wonderful experience of being alive and being this activity that is me is the dance of that, I think. But what really, really helps is knowing what it's made of, like I say, in that way. So it's not trying to have a world that, or exist in a reality that has nothing that catches us out, because that doesn't seem fun. It's just being able to see that for what it is and not perpetuating the resistance. And right, because I mean, I don't know about you, but that's part of being alive. That's part of the perceived duality. That's the richness. Some of the richness comes, the shades and the contrast in being this aliveness of nature comes in that, doesn't it?
Yeah, so lovely. Yeah, I love that. And if we sort of took the biggest picture, if what we were saying earlier, that in infinite absolute peace and bliss, freedom, if we could consider it can't know itself. There isn't anything relative in it. It's just what we are is just absolute. And then for that to come into an experiential world, a world of limitation and form and restriction, really, constraints, it experiences everything that it's not. So the moment so for the baby, pure presence, openness, and then an idea of self developing as a limited, separate, isolated being. Now there's an experience of, so life, in a way, life intelligence is having an experience of what it's not. And I think it's really fair to say then, like, the peak experiences of our lives are those moments of that shift from the acute suffering of limitation, the acute suffering of being separate, to that falling away, and the mind, the body, the whole experience of being returning to truth is is monumental. Like that seems to me, which I think is what, like Byron Katie saying, I look forward to being rejected. I look forward to being made redundant, because when there's that possibility of what we've been talking about happening, and that identification falling away, the beliefs falling away, the wounds finally being healed and dissolving in that space, and now peace, genuine peace, not the pretend peace of trying to hold on to certain emotions and certain experience, but absolute openness of peace is like, that's it. That's the point of life. And when that's the orientation, it does, like, we're looking forward to that happening. Like, we look forward to going through the onion layers that you mentioned, because each moment of enlightenment is bliss, and we actually don't want we're not clinging on to the bliss. We're just fascinated by the shift, it seems to me.
Yes. And yes, because almost that dance is happening at a micro level and a macro level. So it feels like that's happening at a daily, minute basis.
Yes.
And at a sort of slightly more meta level, if that's the right way of putting it. So that in and out of the illusion, and as we become more conscious or awake, then maybe it grows. But I think you're right, because the idea is, I mean, it would be so super boring to be enlightened the whole time. That there'd be no shades, there'd be no contrast, there'd be no richness, there'd be no dance. So I think it is about that. But the reason why I think a lot of it doesn't feel like that to people, a beautiful dance, is because the balance, the shift's off. Because what we tend to do is go into this, we get conditioned to go into this world to achieve, right? I mean, I love Alan Watts, and he was saying this decades ago. We're even worse at it now. I mean, if Alan Watts was around now, he'd be like, oh my God, but he spotted it decades ago. So we put our little kiddies into school to prepare them for the rat race and the hamster wheel, and off we go. Losing the point of the joy in the dance. So if we make it practical now, someone listening might be thinking, well, I want to achieve something in the business world or something in my personal life, that they may have an ambition that they aspire to. And my guess is for people, and this will be different shades of different people, is in that desire, there is sometimes a very kind of pure essence of just emergent purpose, which comes through them. And then sometimes there'll be a kind of I should do this and I should do that in order to survive and be okay. It will, at one end of the spectrum, it's pure emergence, just a non-attached calling, with just an obviousness to it. And the other end of the spectrum, it's I need to do that to be okay and to protect myself from the world that is all crap, right? That's a big continuum I'm pointing to there. But it will dance up and down. But because no one's ever told us about that, and we tend to then get pushed down to the right, or to the latter, which is you need to do this to be okay, to protect yourself, because we don't understand what we truly are. We lose all that stuff at the other side, or it's just spiritual woo-woo, or we haven't got time for that, because we're too busy tethering ourselves to protect ourselves or seek. But the human condition seems to be dancing up and down. Well, if it was allowed to without being conditioned so much in the way we've conditioned the Western world in the last 200-300 years, it would dance up and down there in its own free will, which is what 2-year-olds do all the time.
Yeah. I love that. And so combining that with what we were talking about just before, we could see that suffering, resistance along is a sign of what's going on, where is a sign really on where on the continuum we are. Because we've had this phrase in our courses, our response to their response is really revelatory. Because so say there's say someone wants to write, and so they're writing, and it might be the case that these words are just flowing out. There's what was the phrase you lovely, something about attachment, no attachment.
Neutral? No.
Oh, there's a phrase that you used, but it was really good. Like a sort of sort of egoless space of just pure purpose flowing through. So writing flowing through. There's no identification with it. Any feedback on it, on the writing, is just information. It's completely neutral. And oh, sorry,
That's all right.
It's completely neutral, and that whole space is one of learning, really, and freedom of creation and expansion. But as we find ourselves resistant to what people are saying about our work, or they're even they're criticizing what we're doing, and we're resistant to that, it's really a sign that there is something meaningful in this work about me. Like if you're criticizing this work, you're criticizing me. If this work fails, I fail. And so the suffering in that moment, my response of suffering and resistance to what they're responding to in my work, is really revelatory. And so I would say, let's not wait for, we'll never know. The conscious mind can't ever know where on the spectrum anything is. So I would always say, do the thing. Just do the thing. Launch the business, write the article, have the conversation, do the presentation, ask someone out, do the thing, because our response to their response will show everything. Like, that's information.
Yeah. So there's a feedback, there's an intelligent feedback in the doing.
Yes. Yeah.
That it is part of the evolution in a way. I think it's what you're saying. So
the design.
It's part of the design, isn't it? It's clever that. And I think as long as we know, this is the key thing, isn't it? As long as we know that's how it works, the mechanics of the intelligence of the system is doing that, we then don't self-identify with, because otherwise we misinterpret the feedback as, oh my God, that means something about me and about my well-being.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No.
Yeah.
It's helpful guiding you to say, oh, okay, well, the fact that that's triggered me, to use that common phrase, that's triggered me, shows me where I'm identified.
Yeah.
And it's helpful. But I haven't done the activity. So sometimes, you could just, to avoid all that, you could just squidge your life down to a tiny, weeny little thing and not really do anything, because you don't want to get the feedback.
Yeah.
Feedback's uncomfortable.
Too painful.
And I was actually talking to a client about this yesterday. It's so funny. He was sort of saying, well, he's in a role that's he's got a slightly different style to his peers and on the leadership team. And he said that can be uncomfortable. And I was like, well, what's the problem with uncomfortable in that? Surely that's really rich and helpful to show you. And he's like, oh, okay. So, but normally we would take uncomfortable as I'm in the wrong job.
Yeah.
We could either go, I'm uncomfortable, there's something wrong with them, something wrong with me, I'm in the wrong job.
Brilliant.
That's what we'd normally think uncomfortable means.
Yeah. So
rather than, uncomfortable is just telling me I'm self-identified here. I'm a little bit caught up and I probably can't see the reality of it.
Yeah. I love that. Because I think the outcome now, which I think particularly useful for business, is it showing where what matters more than anything is the survival of the idea of me. And actually the form, the sales, the product, the meeting, all of that is just being used as a vehicle to stabilize and secure this idea of myself as separate and distinct, and that's painful for us, and it means that all of our expertise and resources and sort of subconscious brilliance isn't directed on the subject or on the world of form. It's going round and round in a loop, trying to stabilize something that can never be stabilized. And so I think it's just like what this does is it frees up the world to be as the world is.
Do you know what? I got such a good example of that this morning. I was listening to the radio, and the presenter was drilling our lovely new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, on a U-turn about the tax cuts. And he wanted her to admit she was making a U-turn. But this is a U-turn, isn't it? This is a U-turn. And he must have said it 5-6 times. And I thought to myself, how unhelpful is that? Because you're making this about her, not the issue to start with. You're making it not be okay to be nature and get it wrong. And you're having no humility, because you're almost like he wanted her to admit it. So his ego goes, I'm going to be the journalist that got her to say U-turn. I felt like that's what he's trying to do. Yeah. And she wasn't wanting to say U-turn because her ego's in it. So there's no humility. And then you back yourself into the corner, right, of not being able to see your own resistance to it, which means then you make the knot and the twist that we talked about earlier even tighter.
Yeah.
And I thought it's the last thing we need right now is the egos fighting about in my little personal mind, the dumbasses of the politics, right? Or, of the policy, right? Yes, there doesn't look like a good policy, but we can't even get there because your egos are so entwined in defending whether a U-turn is okay or not. I mean, that just, as you were speaking, I was like, yes, there it is. A really extreme example, I think.
Yeah.
Being played out on the national arena.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's going to contract down the aperture of our politicians to see sense and clarity, because they're so hiding behind, I've got to be seen like this. Yeah. My career. I mean, politics is a real amplifier for this, isn't it? Anyway, that might be an unuseful segue. I don't know what.
Well, no, I know it's an interesting one, because I was thinking, because they're always on these things when stuff's in the news or we're seeing someone else do something. I think it's so valuable to bring it, see what the equivalent is for us. And so you were having that interesting take on I was considering so a decision being taken and then not held up because of how it's perceived and a reaction to it is really interesting, I think, in our lives, that as parents and coaches or citizens or offspring of parents, and where, because I think, going back to what we were saying about immersion in the form, the deeper in we go to the real world, and what in our deepest knowing makes sense to say. So say we have a rule with our children.
Mm-hmm.
What would shake the upholding of that rule is really interesting, I think, of how deeply does that make sense to me, and if their reaction, they might get really upset against it, but unless they're coming up with information that wipes out the information. It's not just their reaction, but they've actually brought something fresh and new, and like a new consideration, then that rule, the rule that I have, should still be upheld.
Right.
Shouldn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Which is going back to what we were saying at the start of, like, feelings are not the thing. Like, feelings are not the thing to take into account.
Yes.
If, you know, so brushing your teeth, who cares less if you're bored? I don't care less if
Yeah.
you're bored, like, if you can't be bothered. I don't even care if you're too tired.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're having too much fun doing something else. As far as I know, everything says brushing your teeth before bedtime is going to
Yeah.
is a no-brainer. You do
Yeah.
that thing. And so I think that, because when we were looking in our course of navigating, it seems to me like the less we navigate by feelings, the better, really, because they're not really information, feelings, but a no-brainer when there is something that is so, like on our recent small group course, a participant was talking about a walk on the beach every morning has no downside for her, and infinite upsides. It sets her day off so well, and everything's different. Her energy is different. Her productivity is different. Everything. So a walk on the beach is a no-brainer. Once that's established, it doesn't matter whether we feel like doing it or not. It doesn't matter whether we've woken up a bit late or we've got a busy day. It doesn't matter. We do the no-brainer. And I think that's quite cool then, to start navigating decisions by the deepest knowing available.
And I'm going to make a distinction here to see whether I'm on the right path, because I'm going to make, this might be semantic pedantic, or it could be just nuance, but I think what I make a distinction with clients, and see whether this is something that you agree with, Claire, is, and this is just language at one level, but it's much, much more, feelings versus sensing. So I'm not a big fan of navigating by feelings, reactions, emotions, because they to me are not coming from that deeper knowing, right? But I do think there is a sensing to that deeper knowing.
Cool.
Because otherwise people go into, oh, it's about thought. And I'm like, no, I wouldn't navigate by thought either. Because to me, emotions and feelings and thought are after the fact. That they are what the conceptual mind has contrived to make sense of the world. They're not our deeper sensing.
Yeah.
So your deeper knowing and my deeper sensing might be the same thing in language. Yeah. Because let's take that walk on the beach. So there's a no-brainer obviousness to the walk on the beach. Now, let's say one morning I just had an inkling, and I use an inkling, a knowing, a sensing, that I wasn't going to go for a walk, right? And I stayed at home. Maybe I'll go later in the day. I don't know, right? And in that hour I didn't go, some synchronicity and serendipity like pops in, or there was a tsunami. I'm going extremes here, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to set a rule for myself going, I always go to the beach. That doesn't feel like what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is it?
I like that. I think, yeah, so that's really interesting. I think that where you're going with that is almost like two types of sensitivity.
Right. Okay.
I think there's the animal sensitivity of us, which is of us, like subconscious, really, a subconscious system immersed in reality, tuned in to data and information constantly, that is not even processed consciously.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of
intuitive, you might call it. Yeah.
so I would class that sensing as that sort of animal reality immersion, complete presence that is really, I would say, like running the body. Like
Yes.
that's what is the only thing really that's going on.
Yes.
And then, so that's also, and I love that. I love what you're saying. And then there's sensitivity at a separation level, because that first sensitivity is there is no separation. It's just a system operate, like a whole universal system operating, we could say, isn't it? Like it's like the oak tree and all the organisms around it. There's no separation really between them. They're all just this sort of fluid flow of information. But sensitivity that is coming from really from an embedded, conditioned idea of ourselves as separate from that, separate from the intelligence, separate from the flow of seamless data. Like now there's me here, and there's me with this mind that has to decide how I'm feeling and what's the right thing to do and how I'm going to finally secure myself and be someone and be loved and have that sort of, and that's highly sensitive to anything that would threaten the idea of me. But it's actually sensitivity that is operating on like it's taking all the resources and attention to fix in place an illusion. And so that level of sense, which I would say is the vigilance about my feelings.
Yes.
So I cannot bear to not feel happy, not feel good. So I'm vigilant about, am I too bored? Am I, that whole bundle is like that can dissolve completely, and we'd be just left with the sensitivity of existence, of life intelligence, and awesome.
And I think that's such an important distinction that you've made there. And I would urge listeners to go back and listen to this bit a few times to see, find your own calibration and barometer on that, because to me, for many decades, they were merged. I had no clue, right? And then you start to get a sensory acuity to it. And I think our role as coaches is sometimes to help people see that, because even just take the little example of the person you mentioned about who goes for a walk on the beach. If they then become, or people who meditate, oh, I need that to be okay today. Right? That's the latter of the one we were talking about, the two sensitivities. Like, oh, without that, I'm going to have a bad day, or my day starts well when I do this. That again is protecting the self from feeling a certain way throughout the day by trying to mitigate it by doing the walk on the beach in the morning.
Yeah.
So now that's not saying going for a walk on the beach isn't a lovely thing to do, but the way it's been set up then is in that protect and seek realm. And that's where we've got to watch.
Yeah, I think that's like a really fascinating area, because, and I think it's where spirituality can sort of get in the way of recognizing that there's an apparent physical system that operates best within certain parameters.
That gets optimized if you put nice stuff in it, not crap stuff in it, and if you exercise it and you move and breathe, and we don't want to. It's not like I can just live in a box and I'll be So and I think that's a good point, because that wasn't quite what I was saying. I think
no, I
agree. There's an intelligence in how to run the body mind. That we've got. Right, which is breathe, sunlight, move, eat, hydrate. I mean, there's loads of others I don't understand, and we don't want to ignore that, going, well, I don't want to be reliant on a walk. But there's also the self-identification with that very same often behavior as I need that to be okay. So I think they get merged, they get squished.
Yeah, and maybe it's the same as what, like, there's sort of two sensitivities in a way, isn't it? Like there's the two ways of relating to conditions, perhaps conditions of the body and my, like, how yeah, I guess how what box they're put in, perhaps, of
Yeah, because sometimes you'll get that. I mean, you probably like me, you get that if you haven't done some movement in the body or breathing or nature, you get a bit of a yearning. Like, if I've been sitting at my desk too long, I get a bit of I just want to go outside.
yeah.
I just want to move, or I want to, and I'll get a yearning, right? Now, let's assume just because my day's set up unhelpfully, I can't, right? I've got another meeting or I've got the kids. If I had it set up in the latter, I'd be like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to push through this next meeting because really what my body needs is this, and this, and blah, 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 blah. But generally what tends to happen is I can get that out of my head, just completely forget I had that yearning. And then later on, it will come back brilliantly, beautifully, remind me. But I'm not holding it as a resistance, like thinking, well, the next hour is not going to be as good because I haven't managed to do that. I'm not buying in so much. Because I think nature gives you quite a lot of leeway in how you can run the system. So I suppose it's how much you self-identify with the need, I suppose, for that.
Oh, it's such an interesting area, isn't it? And I love this, Piers, because I'm wondering if because I guess what we're doing really is throwing everything up in the air. Like there's why would it be better to be on a meeting in a way than to take a walk? And so maybe what we're doing is putting like all actions up, like there.
Yeah.
So there's infinite activities available, and some of them will be, as there's deeper and deeper contact with reality, there's more embodying of the body, there's more attention on reality and truth. It seems to me that that's like an intimacy with a world of actions and outcomes and impact that starts to sort of naturally reveal a way of supporting a body mind to its optimum capacity. And that might be like the things that are becoming apparent might be very different from what a conditioned mind might be.
That's certainly true. I mean, if I just get an example of that, you take alcohol. So I used to, in my 20s, drink quite happily all the time, and now I don't really. And then and if I do have a glass, my system almost notices it quite a lot, going, "Oh, what have you done here?" Right now, I've got kidneys; it's fine. It won't damage me forever. Just having one glass of wine or something. So, but it's almost like my acuity has tuned in to go, "What are you doing?" And now, the same with moving my body and breathing, and my acuity is better. I'm going to say better. I'm taking value judgment on that, but
more sensitive,
more attuned to it. Whereas there are some people who can just sit in a static box in front of a computer screen and la da 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 da, right? Because the system is normalized to that. So I think there is a waking up of our sensitivity to that, which comes, I think, helpfully. because I feel my moment to moment enjoyment and richness of just the everydayness is far greater than it was. I don't need peaks to feel good now. I don't need those moments we talked about. I don't need those really. I mean, yes, they come along, but I don't need them because they're intrinsic in the moment. So there is that, and that's the onion layer I think you're getting rid of. So there's that going on. Then I suppose here's the tricker is when you self-identify with that. That's I suppose what I'm trying to point to. So if I start to self-identify with those behaviors that are intrinsically innately coming through, that's a watch out. Because then I've misconstrued them. I've confused the two sensitivities that we were talking about.
Yeah.
It was actually coming from the more purer sense, and I've made it one of the others.
Yeah.
And I've pinned it to my okayness again. I've tethered it because it does feel like the mind will tether whatever it can to psychological stability. We keep trying to tether things which aren't stable. We keep trying to find things, whether it, to start with, it might be external achievement or material possessions. Then we're like, well, I need to feel good to be okay. So we keep trying to find things that are stable in fundamentally our psychology, which is the internal or external world. It keeps trying to find replacements.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. And so then we could say that that deeper immersion in reality, which actually really is a deeper understanding that the body isn't us. So when we say my okayness, it's not like the body being okay.
That's already tethered, isn't it? Yeah.
It isn't me being okay. It's that there's a different a different experience of life, and really I would say that the more clearly the body is seen as a transient and perception created means through which the life that we are, like a sensory means through which the life that we are explores a world of sensory input, then that's not me, but it is a vehicle. In the same way that the car on the drive, I would take great care of the car on the drive because it's the means of exploring the world. And so same with the body, and that sort of it's ironic, isn't it? The ending of identification with it is actually enabling a greater immersion and respect for it. And it doesn't, you're quite right, absolutely, that the body being okay or not okay isn't me being okay or not okay, because I'm live.
Yeah.
I'm not affected by that. Which is now we're sane. Now there's sanity in the body, operating the body. And I think that's like a breakthrough then in terms of how the body is treated, and what the body means.
Yes, and I think that's absolutely a neat way of putting it, because what the body means, it goes from being, well, it's me, that's I am the body. Here's my hand. Here's my foot. It's me. To if you then go a bit, mountain, no mountain. Oh, it's nothing. No, it's not me. It's nothing. It's just an appearance of consciousness. Right. Yeah. In the Vedanta, you could go there. I'm getting technical now, but when you bring it back into life in the inward facing in the Tantra, you go, no. It's the sensing of the richness of what we are. The one, the system. That is, the body is in that.
Yeah.
Right. And the environment we're in and the chemicals that, and it's so interesting. I've in the last year or so, I got really fascinated by looking at what the body is and the microbes, and it isn't us, it isn't human even now. There's some scientists describe, no, 50% of the microbes are not human. It is not one entity. It is a living organism of all sorts of biodiversity and beautifulness. And we've lost it because our soil's got all this kind of stuff's gone very, very unrich, and our vegetables and all the blah 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 blahs, right? So, and that's where our chronic conditions are coming from in health, is because we are taking the body as a reductionist thing. So we have a kidney specialist, a heart specialist, a joint specialist, a renal system specialist, rather than going, oh no, it's one living organism. And when they test things in Petri dishes, they take it out of the body. They try and they look at cells in a sterile environment. But cells don't live in a sterile environment. They are part of the system. So anyway, that's a whole nother podcast we could do, Claire. But let's get back on this one. So I think what you're saying there really neatly is what the perception of the body is changes its role, I suppose, if I don't know role is the right word. But let's I'm it's probably too late, aware that we've gone all over the place with this. Let's try and come back to if listeners are still with us, this let's see what all of this percolates about want to the topic we started, right? So if we were to try and neatly, or even not so neatly, everything we've been saying, I think, over the last 45 minutes, what does it point to want for you if you try to encapsulate that? Because it's been such a great conversation, but I think there's some real things we've been exploring, and we might be able to just tie it neatly into want.
Nice. I would say it's a perfect system. It's so life intelligence in a sensory vehicle, exploring a sensory world. I would say that, like, the essence of that is desire. It is, it's like a flower growing towards the sunshine, or animals, running around fields. It's like it's desire in action, really, like the desire for experience, the desire to fulfill the various things that we're here to do. And so the system is perfect. Everything is available from that immersion in reality. It becomes very clear that everything that is desired is obtainable when the whole system is in reality. And the only confusion is when that knowing of ourselves as the system, knowing of ourselves as the wholeness of existence, is veiled by an idea that we are separate from it, and that somehow as an individual we have to control all experience, control what's received, control how it's obtained. And it's that very separation from the wholeness that makes it impossible to do that, and which sets up a whole, like we've talked about, a whole load of confusion and vicious circles. But as that becomes more and more obviously not true, more and more obviously not what we are, and the mind settles back into the truth of existence, then there's just intelligence in action, responding to what is, and all the information is there available.
Yeah. Oh, nice. I mean, I'll probably say it similar to you, but I think the system, we are being lived. We are nature. It is one thing, and it works really well, perfectly. It's beautifully design. And the, as you say, the problem, the challenge, or what gets in the way of that is our innocent, invisible misunderstanding of how that works. And this, as this separate self forms as we're young, which is just an activity of the very same system. It's just an activity of it, right?
Yeah.
Which is necessary.
Yeah.
We mistakenly think is a entity in that system that needs to control the rest of the system.
Yeah.
So it's like we've got this smartphone that works beautifully, and then an app pops up going, I am the boss app of all the other apps.
Great analogy.
Right? And we go, oh, okay, boss app. No, but you're not the boss app. You're just a feature of the system, a feature of the phone.
Yeah.
You're not the boss app. You don't need to control all the other apps. You don't need to control the firmware. So, and it would appear to us through those moments of peak experience that we talked about before, that we're doing it right.
Yeah.
When we're trying to control and manage, it would look like we're heading in the right direction, and no one tells us otherwise, apart from the few of us, right? So we carry on that way, and then we suffer on the way, misunderstanding what the suffering is telling us, which is, hey, come back the other way.
Yeah.
Right? You don't need to suffer in this way. But we take the suffering again as a kind of rites of passage or something. So, and then if we're lucky enough, or not lucky enough, but when we wake up to what we're talking about, it all changes. All the pieces of the puzzle fall down differently. The same pieces are there. We still got a body. We've still got a self. We still, but they kind of land differently. And we're like, oh yeah. It's like, I imagine it's when they realize that the sun didn't go around us and we go around the sun. They went, oh, that makes more sense. Yeah, couldn't quite make, and that's what it was. When we work with our clients, like, yeah. So that all about having said, Claire, what would you, if there are any tiny thought experiments for people who are not quite tuned into this yet? Well, what would you give them as a takeaway to just in their moment-to-moment experience, keep an eye on to see a bit more of this? Is there anything you could say, just practically?
I would say really look out for resistance, because that's indicative of really it's indicative of something being manifested from within us and then resisted. And so that is a space for healing, ultimately, I would say. And it's through that layers of belief and burden, really, fear, insecurity, shame, need, fall away through that resistance. It's information about there being something that is ready to dissolve. I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, and I'll say again what you said earlier, which I think was very neat. You gave your example of public speaking resistance. Like, well, you used to get very attached to the thinking about it and try and push the feeling away. And we'll say, do the opposite.
Yeah.
We'll say, ignore your narrative, which is an unreliable narrator, and just lean into the okayness of that sensation. Go there. And it, just like the cold shower, it's nowhere near as bad as you think. Right? So the thought of it is a lot worse than the actual sensation. Because all the sensation is aliveness. So, okay, you're going to feel alive. That's it, right? Do that. Yeah, and I think that's a really neat, practical little thing to help people with, because the amount we try to push suffering or resistance away to be avoided in the game of life, or to be avoided at a feeling level, or to be conceptualized and thought about, but never actually lent into, is vast.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was great, Piers. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And listeners, as always, love to get any feedback and questions. And I'll put all Claire's details in the show notes. She's very prolific. She's very elegant in how she describes. I love the form of your work, Claire. So thank you for putting that out into the world.
Oh, thank you, Piers. Thanks so much, lovely.
All right, take care, everyone, and have fun being curious, and catch you next time.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast and want to know more, check out our website at qualityofmind.biz. And also feel free to reach out and leave us a review or a comment. Until next time, have fun being curious.